working with the entire team at Climate Group has really been one of the most rewarding things that I have been engaged in. And I really am honored. I came late last night to Delhi. I was actually outside India. And when Divya invited me to be here, there is no way I could miss it because so I feel very honored to be here in front of all of you to speak on this very important subject on our migration towards net zero. Because I think what is most important I was reading on the flight yesterday the report by the UN that next year we will surpass China as the most populous country in the world. And what population also means is we keep increasing our carbon footprint for each of us individuals. And again, I think while we look at our increasing population, what we still have to realize is our per capita GDP is still fairly low at about $2,100 on a nominal basis. So what that means is in the coming years, with India growing, I mean, the debate can be, will we grow at 6%, 8%, 10%? But whatever we grow at, what is for certain is that our per capita GDP will rise, and with that, so will our per capita carbon emissions. And so will our per capita. I think carbon is one element of it, but I think more importantly, our impact on the environment, which goes far beyond carbon, if you look at it. So I think what is most critical for us is to have a plan that how do we, while we grow, because ultimately, I always tell people that it's important that while we have seen the way the Western economies have grown. We've seen the way now Middle East has grown, the Eastern economies, Singapore, Indonesia to a certain extent, Thailand, South Korea. But we also need to bring millions and I would say hundreds of millions of our people out of poverty. I think one important statistic is that during COVID, the government of India had to feed 850 million people. They have been out of 1.4 billion. About 850 million people had to get minimum rations. So we have to realize that as these 850 million people come out of poverty towards going in a situation wherein they have a better quality of life, their impact on the environment, their impact on carbon will start increasing. And I think we need to plan from today as to how are we going to mitigate that, and actually how are we going to convert this into a net positive impact on the environment. So I think what is very important is that we need an action plan. And I think one thing which I've always admired with the Climate Group is we've not only looked at the national level, but we've looked at various stakeholders that come in within the economy. So I think the national level is very important. We need to engage with the central governments, both in India and in other countries. But also the sub-national level becomes very, very important. Be it at the state level, if you go even further sub-national, say I come from Mumbai, the BMC, which is the Brihan Mumbai Municipal Corporation, is one of the largest local bodies in the world. And the impact that can have in terms of, because with 20 million people in Mumbai and one of the highest carbon footprints that we have in Mumbai, working at that level also eventually, I mean, I'm not saying we do everything on day one, but eventually is very, very important. But working at a sub-national level is extremely keen. And we will, I was going through the agenda and I'm glad that we will be demonstrating some of our case studies, for example, say with Maharashtra. But we have to take this now to every state, and we need to engage both with the political leadership, the bureaucratic leadership, but also the social sector. I think ultimately, as we need to realize that we all live in an ecosystem. As Climate Group, we all look at ecosystems, and the ecosystem is extremely important. And an ecosystem would mean the politics of it, the bureaucracy, and also business. I think what is important is looking at action also at a business level in terms of how do we engage with several businesses. We announced last year, we had alliances with several companies that we did on, both the commitments to both RE100 as well as, I believe we also had EV100 commitments last year, right? And so I think what is important is we start working on that. And I think a very important aspect of all of this is circular economies, because I think what is important, and I think that's a word that is not spoken about as much, but if you think of it, the world is circular. If you look at the environment, look at rain, it rains, the water then evaporates and it rains back. Similarly, if you look at plant life, it's something very basic, but we tend to forget that they absorb carbon dioxide in the day, give out oxygen, and the other way around in the evening. And so is life. Ultimately, life is also circular. We are born, we grow, we die, and then we go back to the environment. So I think it's important that even economies are very circular. I think we need to realize that a large percentage of what we consume can actually be recycled. A large percentage of what we use, I mean, for example, chemicals, wood, and I think we need to look at circular economies. And what we have to also realize is that while carbon is an important thing to focus on, carbon is not the only thing that we focus on, because ultimately what is I know it's a controversial thing, and I keep seeing my messages change as time goes by. Maybe 5 years ago I was just like carbon, 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 but today as I have looked at, looking at how the economy or how the world is evolving, I think we need to look at carbon. But ultimately, let's remember that what is life? Life is basically two things: water and carbon. That's essentially what we're all made up of. And there is carbon also is an important element in the ecosystem that we look at. So while we need to mitigate carbon, I think we need to focus on carbon as a part of circular economies, and how do we blend that all in to our net zero plan which we have. So again, net zero means net zero carbon. That doesn't mean eliminate carbon. So I think that's something which is very important for us to realize on. And I think there are several aspects which will build this pathway towards net zero for India. One of the important aspects is electric vehicles. I think we need to look at emissions in a big way, and vehicular emissions are a big part of it. And again, while we look at emissions, I think one which I would encourage people to do is also track the life cycle of a battery, both from the manufacturing of a battery, the energy consumption of the battery, the mining that goes into it, but also post facto in terms of how do we work with disposal of the battery. Because while we, the thing is that while we create something new, which is moving from ICs to EVs, we don't want to create a new problem 20 years from now. We want to actually ensure that if we are solving a problem, we solve it really well, really beautifully, and it should not be a problem for the next generation, something that previous generations have created for us. So one is EV. Second is, again, we spoke about industry. I think we really need to explore more on green manufacturing, as well as on reducing the, of course, bringing in energy efficiency. That's another one of our flagship programs, but bringing in energy efficiency into the manufacturing process so that we actually consume less energy per output. I think that is also quite important. And lastly, not last, but one of the other important aspects is agriculture. I think we need to, because agriculture also contributes quite substantially to the carbon footprint. And for example, say rice farming or paddy farming is a very big source of methane. Dairy, and we are one of the largest cattle, well, as not as big as Australia, but one of the largest cattle industries in the world in terms of dairy. So that also has a huge impact. And there are several ways in order to mitigate that, in terms of using fodder which reduces your methane emission, looking at agricultural practices which reduce your chemical fertilizer usage, such as using biostimulants or such as using lesser chemical fertilizers. So I think we need to explore all of these aspects as well as we go ahead as a country, and these have to be done at every level, at a state government level, at a central government level, at a local self-government level, at an industry level, and also at an individual level. I think that's the most important, that if all of us can create a pathway and discipline ourselves, that we as Indian citizens, all 1.4 billion of us, want to go towards a truly net zero future. There is no, and ultimately that's the power of a democracy. We can certainly go and achieve it, because our leaders ultimately come from us. Our Prime Minister has a great vision to take us towards this net zero target, but ultimately all of us have to work along with our governments, because ultimately what are governments? Governments are you and me. The governments are drawn from the people, from the population. So we as a population have to commit to this target, not just the government. We can't expect somebody else to commit and think we'll just live as we do. We also will have to be disciplined. We also will have to walk the talk. And I'm certain that with leadership from organizations such as Climate Group, they'll not only be advisors, not only be stakeholders, but also watchdogs going forward, hoping that we can achieve this. Thank you so much, and look forward to engaging in this next 2 days. Thank you.